So this is going to be why Saints Row failed, and I'm going to go over exactly why I think it might have failed. The first Saint Row was awesome, and I loved it. The second Saint Row was okay. The third Saint Row, it just kind of kept going downhill, and it went from something that made a lot of sense to something that was really unrealistic, and they just leaned the weirdest directions for this game. So what do you guys think about it?
The Saints Row series went from being one of the only franchises that could compete with Grand Theft Auto to literally killing its parent company. What went wrong, and how did one developer lose nearly everything due to one failed game? Well, the story begins in the early 2000s when there was only one open world game that dominated the entire gaming landscape. And of course, it was Grand Theft Auto. The series seemed completely
Saints Row, the first one again.
That is, until two young companies worked together to introduce a worthy rival known as Saints Row. The first Saints Row game was developed by Volition and published by THQ.
And the online play too, where you could like
the game
slap
was a bit buggy and
like
unpolished,
the pimp, protect
but
the
it was
pimp.
embraced by critics
That
and
game was
players
awesome.
alike. It was brimming with personality and scratched a unique itch that gamers didn't even
Purple's
know
an
they
awesome
had.
color.
Volition was incredibly smart about how they tried to create a competitor to GTA. They knew that they couldn't beat Rockstar at their own game, and if they tried to publish a typical gritty shooter set in the city, their project would be dismissed as a knockoff. The only way to compete with Grand Theft Auto was to bring something new to the table. For Saints Row, it was the fact that the game didn't take itself too seriously. Where Grand Theft Auto was about realism, Saints Row was about fun. And this starts with the characters, who were
That's what was so awesome about it.
of gangsters, with banter that was packed with fun, not so serious one-liners. The story follows your character as you help your fellow gang members take down rivals in the city of Stillwater. And while this first installment was much more serious than its successors, it still found a unique voice when compared to GTA. The writing was balanced, keeping the tone light while also allowing one to genuinely fall in love with the main protagonists. There were some deeper themes mixed in, with missions where you have to ragdoll your character into traffic to collect insurance money.
That was a fun
It was the perfect
insurance fraud was a fun mission type. Okay.
Held up by legitimately solid and
isolated. Thanks for the follow.
Centered on the story's escalating gang war. Saints Row's combination of fun gameplay and
you also got to
humor
rob people.
The young franchise a healthy fan base. By the end of the year,
Courtney,
it
thanks for
sold
the
more
follow.
than 1 million copies. Volition had the start of a real franchise on its hands. It was clear that Saints Row had a lot of potential, so both THQ and Volition knew that they had to be very intentional with their next moves regarding the series. They needed to turn their smash hit into an empire that could truly challenge.
All right, so let's see. We had Saints Row, the first one, bomb game. We had Saints Row 2, that was pretty much a Saints Row 1, but like added some stuff in that was pretty cool and made it okay. I didn't mind playing through that one. Saints Row 3 got way too corny. With like the way that you could play the game and stuff. It reminded me of Crackdown more than anything. And Saints Row 4 is like with the... But look at this. Like, look at this nonsensical stuff. I guess it's fun if you want to live in or play in a fantasy land, but I didn't like it that much.
And Theft Auto. And at least in the early stages, they would do exactly this. Within 2 years, Volition followed up with a solid sequel. Saints Row 2 was built directly on the foundation that was established by the original. The story is set a few years after the first game and keeps the core characters and off-the-wall humor and action and expands on it. And because of
that's why it was okay.
Saints Row 2 is the most beloved game of the entire franchise. They really
absolutely. Why wouldn't it be?
Park. So of course, they followed this up with Saints Row 3. The third game in the series takes us to a new city and leans even more into the humor of previous games. Saints Row 3 feels like a massive amusement park entirely focused on allowing the player to have a good time and cause massive amounts of chaos. And this is also the title where the franchise finally left Grand Theft Auto's shadow and established itself as its own unique IP. And part of this reason is because they continue to drift further away from the serious tones in the previous two games and focus more on outlandish, wild, and edgy humor. And as you probably know, this is what Saints Row became known for.
Catch me wearing that at the next con.
The edgy and hilarious themes that the Saints Row series leaned into, let's introduce Johnny Gat. This fan-favorite character is a deadpan, edgy sociopath who always shoots first and never asks questions at all, cares nothing about collateral damage, and is extremely self-obsessed. He says things that he shouldn't say, does things that he shouldn't do, and his edginess is why fans loved him. Fans also loved the insane array of hilarious various weapons like the Shark-O-Matic, which shoots shark guts at enemies, the Apoca-Fist, which
Maybe I
are
should
comically
replay that.
large fists that splatter civilians,
Maybe I
and
should
the
replay Saints 3.
Penetrator, which we aren't going to talk about. The character customization, the vehicles, the combat, everything about Saints Row 3 was extremely unique, and it all had a lot of charm. Volition used this quirky humor as a key differentiating factor to play Saints Row over Grand Theft Auto, and this is a big part of what helped it to excel as a franchise.
Maybe I was a little bit too harsh on Saints Row 3.
Support from fans.
Okay, so you tell me, which one was best? Saints Row 1, Saints Row 2, or Saints Row 3? Because in my opinion, Saints Row 2 was the best one. I have the most nostalgia for Saints Row 1. And Saints Row 3 seems like it was 2 and 1 combined that didn't do either one as good as the other. But Saints Row 4. Now, if you like Saints Row 4 and that's your favorite, you let me know so I can stay the hell away from you.
Fans and critics fairly quickly, but could this momentum last forever? Volition was in the process of developing an expansion for Saints Row 3 called Enter the Dominatrix. But as work was being done on this new spin-off, THQ, Volition's publisher, went bankrupt. This was bad, and it meant that funding for the new expansion and all future Saints Row projects was on hold. This could have very easily—
Wait, what happened to THQ? Guys, I had no idea THQ had fallen off like that. What happened to THQ? What happened to THQ? Y'all tell me, what happened to them? Boy headquarters, bankruptcy, look, Saints Row, Darksiders Red Faction, WWE SmackDown, SpongeBob, and Nickelodeon titles. They had it all, man. They had everything. Revenue dropped, debts piled up, investors lost confidence. So it was Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They had Ubisoft got South Park. Deep Silver got Saints Row and Metro. Oh, herein lies the problem. Maybe Deep Silver had some things going on, and they really kind of messed things up for Saints Row. I don't know.
Been the singular moment that killed Saints Row, but Deep Silver saved the day. The publisher Deep Silver won the bidding for both Saints Row and Volition, meaning that they took full ownership of the entire studio.
That's crazy.
And would publish future Saints Row games.
That's Crackdown.
This was great news for Volition because it likely saved the entire franchise from being canceled altogether. They now had the backing and financial support to continue to work on the series, and that little Saints Row 3 expansion project now had the potential to be turned into something larger, a full game. And with Deep Silver being known for publishing other outlandish titles like Dead Island, they were likely much more comfortable than THQ with the increasingly quirky and bizarre direction that Saints Row was going in. It was the perfect partner for Volition, and Saints Row 4 was on the horizon. In 2013,
do y'all remember, though, in Saints Row 1, where you went into your online match, and there was 4 people versus each other, and one person was the pimp, and he had to get out of the building before the other dudes could kill him, and he could run fast, and when he smacked you, you're dead. One hit kill. It was just like a oddball punch from Halo. That was so much fun. Who played that? Like, am I the only person who played that? What's going on?
the game launched. Instead of the usual semi-grounded gang battles, the protagonist in this game somehow developed superpowers, became the president, and needed to fend off an invading alien race. It was by far the funniest and strangest game yet, and it seemed like Volition and many of its fans had fully embraced this new identity. The game was great.
I didn't.
Well, for most. Despite the positive reviews, the release of the sequel was a mixed bag. Some fans felt that it had gone completely off the rails and lost itself. As much as
it did go completely off the rails and waste itself.
They still had respect for the characters and the narrative that they were spinning. Abandoning the core tension of grounded gang wars seemed like a misstep to a lot of people. Many fans wanted the game to go back to its roots. And ironically, Deep Silver would later attempt to do this, and like I said, as we all know, it failed. And these fans were even more disappointed.
I mean, this is all cool. Look, don't get me wrong, guys. Let me know what you think. This was all cool. All of this wing shit, this was cool stuff. It just wasn't Saints Row. You could have made a different game and incorporated all this stuff, and I'd have been like, yeah, it's got Saints Row vibes, but it's this instead. But you had to mess it up. You had to change it up. Who thinks that they messed it up with this?
developed another Saints Row game called Gat Out of Hell. This was again supposed to be an expansion, but somehow turned into yet another entirely new game. And, well, the reception wasn't great. Fans of the original grounded Saints Row style hated this even more than Saints Row 4, and people who actually enjoyed the new style thought it should have just been a DLC for the previous game. Across the board,
these would have been awesome as DLCs.
Regarded as something that
these would have all been awesome as DLCs, and the reason why is because we would have been able to have the expansion and pay for it if we wanted to, but know that the core game is a different thing that we really bought the game for. And then you could spend additional money if you wanted some of these off-the-wall creatives. And when games do this, I really don't like it because they're getting away from what the core fan base really wanted. Put it into an expansion. Don't make it the next series in the game because then you rob the core audience of their experience and their excitement for the next game. Make it an expansion and choose to buy it if we want to. We probably will, even if it sucks, but we're not going to hate the franchise after that. We're going to be excited for the next game. Isn't that how that works?
That simply shouldn't have been made.
It's gotta be how it works,
coming
dude.
out only 2 years after Saints Row 4, fans were getting a bit worried that Deep Silver was going to milk and potentially ruin this franchise. And oh boy, were they right. Now real quick, I was going to dive into the disastrous launch of Agents of Mayhem, which was set in the Saints Row universe and was supposed to be some kind of spin-off. But the story of this game could be an entire video, so let me know in the comments if that's something you want to see. Long story short, Volition used the Saints Row name to try to sell copies of this new, uninspired spin-off game, and everything about this game was extremely underwhelming and disappointing. This, combined with the uninspired and pointless release of Gat Out of Hell, really made fans lose hope in the series, and people had genuine concerns that Deep Silver was going to absolutely...
It would be cool if they had the rights to, like, what is it called? The Birds of Prey? What was it called? Suicide Squad. Yeah, Suicide Squad. If they had that and they made this kind of style into a game like that, that'd be pretty dope. I'd play it.
Saints Row franchise. If the series were to survive, they would need something amazing.
Because look, it's just edgy
and it sucks when a developer ruins a game franchise. These days, we don't even own our games anymore, and if a developer or a platform like Steam decided that they wanted to remove your game from your account, they have the ability to do that. In fact, most games these days have DRM, which basically means that the games you buy aren't really yours. You can use them as long as the developer allows it, but you don't.
So did you guys know that even whenever you had the disc itself, you were kind of buying the disc? You were buying licensing to play the game. You weren't buying the actual ownership of that software. It's just the disc you're buying, and the software on it is a license to use the software that they provided to you. It's your copy of the software that you have a copyright to. But not really. They have ownership rights over. They can pull your copyright anytime they want. So that's how it works, and it's totally messed up. Like, who thinks that you should be able to spend $60 on something that you don't own? There's tons of things that we do nowadays where we have to buy stuff that we don't own, and it sucks. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
Own it. And this is something that I'm extremely passionate about. I feel like gamers should actually be able to own their games and not be controlled by the whims of money-hungry developers. And to be honest, that's why I buy most of my games from GOG. GOG is a marketplace where you can buy games and actually own them. You can download the actual files and store them wherever you want and use them however you want. The games are truly yours, and unlike Steam and Epic and all these other places that prevent
Wait, hold on. God of War for PC? Are these all PC games, guys? How did I not know about this?
From owning the games that you spend
what
your
is this service
money
called?
on,
Witcher 3
you can play them wherever and however you want without having to log into an account or be connected to the internet. So if you want to actually own your games again, consider purchasing them from GOG using my link in the description. I am a part of their affiliate program, so I will get a small commission.
Oh, so he's an affiliate.
And it's
so
a great way
who's
to
tried
support
GOG before? I had no idea that you could do this. Is this legit?
Now back to what I was saying. So, after 4 years of near silence, Deep Silver would announce the newest title in the Saints Row series at Gamescom 2021. Interestingly, the new game was a complete reboot of the franchise rather than a direct sequel. Because of the absurdity of the last full release and the even more absurd expansions, the devs believed that they had written themselves into a corner. As stated by Jim Boone, the chief creative officer at Volition, even though we love the mechanics with all the superpowers, there isn't a whole lot of runway to go past that. It's why it was a pretty easy decision to go back to our roots and do something that was more contemporary. This
Thanks
reboot was
for
supposed to
figuring
do
out.
exactly that. Take the series back to its roots and give it a fresh start and the
Oh,
chance to recapture new and old fans alike. It's easy to make a case for why this was a good idea. I mean, Saints Row 4 was nearly 8 years old, and
yeah.
gaming had come a long way in that time. Although the franchise's sequels had innovated in numerous small ways,
I do want
each
to hear
game
more
still
about that.
relied on the same
Good one.
basic formula that was now almost 2 decades old. The reality is that many fans were calling for the series to end by the 3rd game, and even more thought it should have stopped at the 4th game. People had liked Saints Row, but they were beginning to feel like the series was just getting milked for money. The devs needed to prove that they actually had interesting ideas for those sequels and that they were more than just a cash grab. And although there were certainly benefits to a reboot, there were
every
also
game
a lot
developer
of
is kind of a cash grab
Reboots
if
have
you
gotten
really
a
want to
pretty
get through
bad
it.
reputation in recent years. Fans are tired of childhood favorites being puppeted by cynical companies looking to profit off nostalgia. And that was part of the reason why fans reacted harshly when they realized that none of the old characters were returning for this game. Instead, we were getting an entirely new cast and story. And the writing changes weren't just limited to new characters, but a complete tone shift.
I think that if the characters are good, I don't mind if they replace Gat. I don't really mind if they place some of the good characters that I really liked in Saints Row. But maybe they should at least have some cameos coming in there. I think that'd be a great idea.
The edgy humor that had made people fall in love with the franchise was gone. Instead, the devs had attempted to shift to a writing style that was meant to appeal to younger audiences. I say attempt because the writers completely dropped the ball. Every word of dialogue in Saints Row 2022 comes off as trite and cringy. A game series that was known for its unique humor was suddenly
Guys, Cat. The generation nowadays is kind of cringy, don't you think? Isn't that kind of what they're going for? Is that what they're implying? That newer generations are really cringy, and so they'll love this dialogue because it's just like them? Is that what I'm implying? Let me know in the comments if you think that.
dropping awful lines like this.
Get the fuck away from my friends.
Saints Row's main characters had always been parodies of the traditional
Inspired.
gangster. By contrast, the new series was trying to replace them with a squad of scrawny millennials who were actually trying to be cool, and just weren't. I mean, just take a look at the comments on the reveal trailer. The reboot was supposed to be a return to the series' roots, yet Saints Row had never felt less like Saints Row. Right off the back, the game was met with a ton of hate from fans. Trailers are supposed to be an opportunity for companies to put their best foot forward and generate hype, and somehow, this trailer had actively pushed people away from buying the game, and things were only going to get worse. Almost right after the announcement of the reboot, it was revealed that Mike Watson, aka Idle Ninja, had passed away. Watson had been one of the most influential modders in the Saints Row community. He was responsible not just for some of the best mods in the community, but also for working on an official patch for Saints Row 2 to fix many of the issues with the PC port. Watson had been battling cancer for a while, but that hadn't stopped him from pouring his heart and soul into the community. And some fans felt that the reboot was a slap in the face to his legacy. Others felt that the studio should be dedicating more resources to finish the patch that Watson had been working on before his death to ensure that the project was finally completed. Regardless of the quality of the Saints Row revamp, it's undeniable that many at Volition cared for Watson and were genuinely devastated by his passing. A lot of the insults and digs that fans took at grieving employees were legitimately uncalled for. However, it was also a representation of just how much Saints Row fans had turned against Volition. In many ways, Mike acted as a bridge between the company and fans. His loss ensured that the divide between them was only going to grow wider. The game hadn't even dropped, and Volition was facing a fan base that was more against them than they had ever been before. But it was too late to cancel the game or make any big changes. All they could do now was release it and pray that the full experience was a lot better than the trailer led people to believe. Saints Row was released on August 23rd, 2022, with all the grace of a car crash. Somehow the game was even worse than players thought. Even critics who usually give everything positive reviews were trashing the game.
They're joking,
It was buggy to the point of being unplayable.
There's no wheels on that car,
graphics were
right?
dated and lifeless. And it wasn't just the graphics that felt
Where
old,
did that
but
dude
the
go?
entire design of the game itself. In an attempt to go back to its roots, Saints Row somehow only succeeded in bringing back outdated design choices that modern games have avoided.
So they brought back
years.
all the stuff that we didn't want, and then they didn't add anything that we might have enjoyed. That's so sad.
The game is packed full of repetitive side missions that are tedious more than anything else. Practically every side quest boiled down to stealing something or shooting someone. There are annoying stealth sections, which as we all know, people hate. The AI for enemies is incredibly stupid, and you can't even interact with most of the world. There are bicycles you can't ride, casinos you can't enter, and much more. In the modern era, where open world games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Breath of the Wild have become the standard, Saints Row 2022 was laughably outclassed. But the real disaster with the new release was the absolutely atrocious writing and corporatized lifeless characters and story. All the raunchy and edgy jokes of past games were actively sanitized to the point in which nobody really understood who it appealed to. The game's characters came off as sitcom teenagers rather than hardened gangsters. There was no depth to these characters and no attempt to get us to like them. They were all basically archetypes that existed to do nothing but spout quirky one-liners that weren't even funny, and you could feel Volition's desperation to be hip with the kids oozing through the screen. But more importantly, the game didn't have anything to say. There could have been real comedy in this setup. You have a bunch of loser, privileged teenagers acting as wannabe gangsters. If Volition leaned into this...
That's pretty much how society is now. You got a whole bunch of kids who are wannabe gangsters and acting out and thinking they're tough and hardcore when they're not. I mean, that's not uncommon at all.
Maybe could have been potential for a lot of actually good jokes, and something like this would be somewhat different from the past Saints Row sequels. But that wasn't what happened. Volition made their cast boring and tried to toss in every buzzword they could justify, and it came off as a painfully corporate attempt to seem modern. And the poor writing poisoned the rest of the game. Some of the other design choices could have been forgiven if the game at least made you laugh, but it didn't. So in the end, we were left with a game with dated mechanics, terrible writing, and so many bugs that it was practically unplayable. It should be obvious how Saints Row became one of the worst reviewed games of 2022. It was
come on, it can't be that bad.
Saints Row was a disaster from a corporate perspective as well. Volition's parent company,
Meaningful, thanks for the follow, buddy.
Immediately entered panic mode. The CEO released statements expressing their shock and disappointment at the game's reception, which is crazy because they should have seen this.
I wish they had just done better with the online play.
Horrible spot too, because Volition had burned so much goodwill from the fan base that it was unclear if they could ever even bounce back.
Well, it was obvious that Volition it was a shell of its former self after everything that had happened to them, through all the bad games that they had made, through the loss of some of their best employees. Like, obviously it's going to be a bad time for them.
A good amount of fans had already sworn off the series for good, and another sequel wasn't going to fix that. And all of these factors led Embracer to make a pretty tragic decision. They shut down Volition. The studio was merged into a subsidiary company of Gearbox Entertainment, who was just acquired by Take-Two Interactive. So now, there are so many levels in the structure that Volition is pretty much irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, and that, at least for the foreseeable future, there is little to no hope of Saints Row coming back and redeeming itself.
For half
and there's
of while it
something
lasted.
kind of sad about that, but a lot of people may look at it as a good thing. So is Saints Row dead for good? Maybe. The rights to the game still belong to Deep Silver. They may choose to bring the series back, but it's more likely that the game is finally laid to rest, especially since they no longer own Volition, and they only own the rights to the IP. Honestly, the whole reason that any of this happened is because Deep Silver's insistence on milking the franchise for all it had. And because of this, perhaps it's for the best that the game is finally done for good. Would you guys want another Saints Row, or do you think that the series is a lost cause? How do you feel about the tragedy of the newest Saints Row? Did you ever play the old ones? Let me know your thoughts on this whole situation in the comments.
It was definitely a lost cause, guys.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.
Welcome, one and all.
I don't think that it's necessarily a bad series. I really like the series for what it was worth. Maybe the first 3 games. I changed my mind. Not just the first 2, but the first 3 games. I'll probably go replay some of them at some point in time. But where they went to and what they did as with their creative freedom was not what we wanted, and the whole expansions turning into game things, not what we wanted. And then it just did seem like it was becoming more of a cash grab than anything at all. If you had a really good experience with Saints Row, let me know what your experience was, because I am really interested in knowing, because it's very nostalgic for me and I kind of like to relive it.